We recently rescued a Milfinito who was held captive by the Embedded in Castle Drang Lake, and we are now going to report her rescue to one of the Milfinito who lives within the Milfinito resting place, as I call it. You can only proceed through the doors to this place if you are in a hollow form, and since I am hollow at the moment, I thought I would take advantage of this and go to this optional area. The reward you get for rescuing the Milfinito is actually another fire seed, which is great if you're a pyromancer, but since I'm not really doing a lot of pyromancy in this build, it doesn't affect me all that much. But that is part of the reason why there are so many pyromancers around this area, is because the Milfinito have some sort of tie to pyromancy. The game never really explains this, but it obviously is significant, because especially in Scholar of the First Sin, there are several pyromancers in this area. As sort of my final thoughts on the Milfinito, I think that they are a really interesting addition to the Dark Souls lore. I like how they are kind of offspring, so to speak, of Gravelord Nito, and how they're trying to continue his legacy, albeit in a more peaceful and less scary way. They're very neat characters.
Who are you? And what do you want from us? Milfinito, that is what we are called. My name? Do you mean our name? We know nothing of the outside world. We sing eternally for those who bear death and dark within themselves. We have been here forever. We know nothing of the outside world, and we do not need to. The little ones were born from the great dead one, and the great dead one taught us song. We have sung ever since, to comfort those bound by death and dark. This is what we were taught. We hear a song in the distance. You rescued a Milfinito who was taken from us. Take this. We Milfinito thank you.
Now that we have some giant souls to help break Vendrick's defenses, we are finally going to try to put the hollowed, withered form of King Vendrick to rest. Now, even though we've lowered Vendrick's defenses, we still have to be very careful while fighting him, because he hits incredibly hard, and he can easily kill you in 1 to 2 hits if you aren't careful. So for this boss battle in particular, it's imperative that we don't make any big mistake, because one mess-up may cost us the fight. This is one of the longer boss battles in Dark Souls 2 as well, particularly with my current weapon sets. I don't damage him as much as some other like high DPS builds or stuff like that, but it makes for a very intense and eerie battle, I think. So I hope you enjoy this fight with King Vendrick.
coveter of the throne. I am Vendrick, ruler of Drang Lake. As flame rises, so does it fade. Such is the way of things. Do you intend to link the fire? Then you must first take the throne. Prove your worth. Find the ancient crowns. Seek adversity, and they will be yours. And your wishes granted. And your wishes granted.
These conversations with King Vendrick in their past are one of the best add-ons to the Dark Souls 2 game, I think. These conversations were peppered in all throughout the Lost Crowns DLC trilogy, and you see their full effect once you've played through all 3 expansion areas. But Vendrick has some of the most compelling and awesome dialogue in the series, in my opinion. He told us to find the ancient crowns and seek adversity, for that will become our strength. And with those crowns, we may be able to best the dangers that lie before us in the Throne of Want. In addition, now that we've defeated the hollow form of King Vendrick, we now have access to the armor set and his soul. The soul of the king reads, "Soul of Vendrick, king of Drang Lake. This great soul beckoned the dark, overwhelming the king. Perhaps this king, who once ruled the world of men, was a lacking vessel for the true throne." What I like about that description there is it again gives us a hint as to what ultimately was Vendrick's downfall. He lacked a certain element that was needed to proceed to the true throne, and he probably recognized this, and that's why he fled from the kingdom when it became threatened by the dark, as it says. It is probably unintentional, but because of the great strength of his soul, that is what called the dark to him. But what form did the dark take? Well, I won't spoil that for those of you who haven't played this game yet, because it's a pretty neat twist that I rather like. Continuing on, we learn a little bit more about the Great King and the King's armor. Armor of Vendrick, King of Drang Lake. What makes a king? Some say that it is birthright, while others call it destiny. Perhaps it is not important, as long as the king's name serves to unite his people. And that's one of the big questions of Dark Souls 2 that they throw at you all throughout the game, is what defines a king? What makes a king? It's a question that makes for some great, thoughtful discussion, and it even applies to some rulers in today's world, I think, in that what truly defines a king? What defines a great leader? Because Vendrick was the king of this land, and he led them to prosperity and victory all throughout his life. But towards the end, he lost his way, and he realized that this was happening, and tried to prevent greater damage being done to his legacy and to his kingdom. Moving on, now we have the King's Ultra Greatsword, which is one of the boss weapons you can get from his soul. An Ultra Greatsword forged from the soul of King Vendrick inflicts heavy damage on enemy armor. Only the king knows whether the depiction of the queen is a resentful mockery or an affectionate exaltation. And this is because the King's Ultra Greatsword has a statue, kind of the Queen Nashandra on the actual blade of the weapon. Now, we've already met Nashandra, and we know that she wasn't overly fond of Vendrick because she even told us to put him down because there's no need for 2 rulers, so we know that she doesn't exactly have Vendrick's best interests in heart. She does come across as selfish when we meet her, but there is even more to her character that makes her a lot more interesting, in my opinion. It makes her, once we find out her true backstory and Nashandra's origin, it makes her one of the coolest characters in the series, at least in my opinion, and there's a lot more to her than it first appears. The final bit of lore on King Vendrick I want to explore is touched upon in his other boss weapon, the Ruler's Sword. Great Sword of Vendrick, King of Drang Lake. The strength of this sword is relative to the number of souls possessed by its wielder. One fragment of dark, having taken human shape, became obsessed with the king's souls. Impelled by its own cravings, It sought souls, and strove to make the strength of the giants its own. I do like how this bit of lore here heavily hints at who's responsible for all the tragedy and destruction that has afflicted Drang Lake, but it doesn't outright say it. So it's still nice that they don't spoil it for those of you who haven't figured it out yet. All of this to say that the tale of King Vendrick is ultimately tragic, and I believe that the tragedy of King Vendrick is one of the most interesting stories in the entire series of Dark Souls.
Bearer of the curse, I will always be at your side until hope has fully withered.